one of the many really interesting things about the movie for me is sort of the notion of what's conscious and what's unconscious.
I mean, first and foremost, what is not conscious and what is not said is that we're two upper-class guys spending hours talking about life while others are working and suffering and, so the most unconscious thing is our political environment.
Right.
My Dinner with Andre is a profoundly misunderstood film, maybe one of the most misunderstood films of the Western canon. Because of its groundbreaking form as a single conversation almost 2 hours long, both parody and criticism have defined it in the popular imagination as the film about two people talking. It has since become famous for its universal simplicity.
It wasn't about making me happy. I chose My Dinner with Andre because it's about a guy who has an unexpectedly enjoyable evening with a weird friend he's been avoiding lately.
In his reviews of the film, Roger Ebert has argued, "What they actually say is not really the point, I think. I made a lot of notes about Andre's theories and Wally's doubts, but this is not a logical process. It is a conversation in which the real subject is the tone, the mood, the energy. Here are two friends who have each found a way to live successfully."
We see those images in our head. The movie is like listening to a radio play in that although you see two people on the screen, in your mind you're also seeing these strange and weird and wonderful scenes and experiences. It's spellbinding.
It is the medium of storytelling as such that concerns Ebert, not the stories themselves. The differences between the characters carry no real stakes. Both characters have, quote, each found a way to live successfully. This is a reading that mirrors the formal equality of liberalism. One opinion is just as good as another, just so long as those opinions are not allowed any substantive social effectivity. The problem with these kinds of readings is that the political content of what the characters actually talk about has been lost. This is unfortunate because the film provides us with a very rich critique of capitalism and its psychosocial effects.
Yes. We are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people.
Although critics have argued that what Andre and Wally say doesn't really matter, this ignores the fact that Wallace Shawn fought hard to keep every single line of dialogue that the director Louis Malle wanted to cut.
I think I would explain at great length why every sentence could not be cut. Because it had 4 different purposes in the script, and I think I would list all 4. I had a reason for doing the things that I did, and I would insist on explaining it.
When we actually listen to the characters with this in mind, what emerges is not at all reducible to a generalized existential ennui, as many have interpreted it. On the contrary, the film is shot through with anxieties that are decidedly political. The very first words of the film are telling. Wally describes the everyday details of his work, and production emerges explicitly as struggle.
The life of a playwright is tough. It's not easy, as some people seem to think. You work hard writing plays, and nobody puts them on. You take up other lines of work to try to make a living. I became an actor, and people don't hire you. So you just spend your days doing the errands of your trade. Today, I'd had to be up by 10 in the morning to make some important phone calls. Then I'd gone to the stationery store to buy envelopes, then to the Xerox shop. There were dozens of things to do. By 5 o'clock, I'd finally made it to the post office and mailed off several copies of my plays, meanwhile checking constantly with my answering service to see if my agent had called with any acting work. In the morning, the mailbox had just been stuffed with bills. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to pay them? After all, I was already doing my best.
To reinsert the political into the film is to be confronted by alienation in its historical sense. not merely anxiety as a universal human condition. Although an aspiring member of the petite bourgeoisie, Wally is still a worker. He puts on his tie only when he reaches the restaurant, and he walks awkwardly through the bourgeois setting. He tries to order a club soda, and the bartender responds,
I'm sorry, sir, we only serve sauce de pavillon.
The effective weight of the unexpectedly enjoyable evening arises directly from the fact of Wally's exploitation. He explains the reason for his initial trepidation himself. I had problems of my own. Andre, on the other hand, is able to navigate the French menu with ease, and people have, quote, always known that he has some money somewhere.
The aranya galuska, how do you prepare that?
Andre seemed to know an awful lot about the menu. I didn't understand a word of it.
Fella, very good, I think.
No, I think I'll have the caille au raisin,
Very
quail.
good.
Oh, quails. I'll have that as well.
Two.
Great.
Great.
And then I think to begin with the terrine de poisson.
Yes.
What is that?
It's a sort of pate, light, made of fish.
Does it have bones in it?
No bones. Perfectly safe.
At the end of the film, he pays for both of their meals. It would be a mistake to understand the differences between these characters as arbitrary differences in worldview. These are grounded material differences arising from differing class positions. It's useful here to quote Brecht. The drama, force of collision, the passion, degree of heat, the range of characters, none of this can be separated from social function and portrayed or propagated apart from it. Those close interactions between human beings in struggle are the competitive struggles of developing capitalism, which produced individuals in a quite particular way. Put another way, the motivations and emotional investments of these characters are grounded in ways of living specific to a capitalist mode of production, a grounding that the film does a lot of work to establish. This film is fundamentally a film about work, and the kind of escapes that are available to those of us who do work.
I mean, I'm just trying to survive, you know? I mean, I'm just trying to earn a living, just trying to pay my rent and my bills. I mean,
Only when we acknowledge the politicized nature of his characterization can we really see Andre for the tragic character that he is, one who could live in his art, but never in his life. A line that both encapsulates the ideological function of cultural production under capitalism and unites the film's political content with its unique form. With the screenplay adapted from the tapes of real conversations between Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory, the whole film is the two actors living in their art.
I mean, ideally, the goal, I suppose, was to make up nothing and to make a fake conversation using only real fragments of conversation. In other words, months of conversation were cut up into minuscule scraps and glued together again in a sort of way that no one would notice.
Beyond characterization, the film returns again and again to a thematic core that can only be fully elucidated in the context of the film's class politics. Many have identified this thematic core as a statement on the dangers of living life unconsciously. This is not incorrect, but it means little without accounting for the film's pervasive concern with fascism. Fascism is repeatedly invoked throughout the
Never knows
film.
where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late." See, actually for 2 or 3 years now, Chiquita and I have had this very unpleasant feeling that we really should get out. And we really should feel like Jews in Germany in the late 30s. Get out of here. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction.
This isn't surprising when we recall the wartime experiences of the director Louis Malle, who as a child witnessed the Gestapo raid his school and send 3 of his classmates to be murdered in the concentration camps.
And then one at a time, they would ask one of us to come with them, and I was one of the last. And they came for me, and they put me a blindfold on me, and they ran me through these fields, 2 people. And they'd found a kind of potting shed, you know, a kind of shed on the grounds, a little tiny room that had once had tools in it. And they took me down the steps into this basement, and the room was just filled with harsh white light. Then they told me to get undressed and give them all my valuables. Then they put me on a table and they sponged me down. Well, you know, I just started flashing on death camps and secret police. I don't know what happened to the other people, but I just started to cry uncontrollably. Then they got me to my feet and they took photographs of me naked. And then naked, again blindfolded, I was run through these forests and we came to a kind of tent made of sheets with sheets on the ground, and there were all these naked bodies huddling together for warmth against the cold.
It is fascism that provides the ethical problem of living life unconsciously, with its stakes. This gets most explicit when Andre chastises himself, realizing the fundamental contiguity of fascism and bourgeois class privilege.
Well, you know, frankly, I'm sort of repelled by the whole story, if you really want to know.
What?
I mean, who did I think I was, you know? I mean, that's a story of some kind of spoiled princess, you know. Who do I think I was, the Shah of Iran? You know, I really wonder if people such as myself are really not Albert Speer, Wally. No? Hitler's architect, Albert Speer?
What?
No, I've been thinking a lot about him recently because I think I am Speer. And I think it's time that I was caught and tried the way he was.
What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, you know, he was a very cultivated man, an architect, an artist, you know, so he thought the ordinary rules of life didn't apply to him either. I mean, I really feel that everything I've done is horrific. Just horrific.
My God, but why?
Importantly, this is more than a historical point about fascism as a simple effect of capitalism. Through Andre, the film is repeatedly communicating to the audience that there is something obscene and fascistic in the daily functioning of capitalism, and that we are complicit in the violence of class domination insofar as we remain mystified by capitalist ideology, insofar as we fail to live life consciously. This problem of living ethically under capitalism is what troubles Andre throughout the film, and is what would come to trouble Wallace Shawn in real life after making My Dinner with Andre.
We made the movie about sort of being asleep and waking up. Are you just kind of crawling through your life like a mole, looking at your feet? I don't know if moles do look at their feet, but not really observing what's going on in your own life or even allowing your own consciousness to take in anything. Like him, I became very agitated and went through a certain waking up process, but it was not really so much about my place in the universe as my place as a beneficiary of the American Empire.
These themes would be further explored by Shawn in his 1985 essay, Morality, and again a decade later in his 1990 play, The Fever. It's also interesting to note that Shawn originally wanted to depict the struggles of the working class peripherally, relative to his 2 protagonists, much like Jean-Luc Godard's 1967 film, Weekend.
Then there would be a third element, which would be the real world going on, while the 2 different types of bourgeois flaneur or whatever were chatting. I mean, that maybe we would be walking and we would be passing people who were digging a ditch and working. I saw a Weekend of Godard with my mother, and I was enraged by it, and I said, this is the most horrible thing that I've ever seen.
I hate it. And over the course of maybe 2 days, it sank in on me. And I then decided that it was like my favorite movie that I'd ever seen in my life.
And it was prophetic.
And it was prophetic.
Yes, it was prophetic.
Unaware of this context, critics have argued that the primary conflict between Wally and Andre in this film is the contradiction between spiritualism and pragmatism. But this depoliticized reading doesn't really hold up when we look at the conclusion of Wally's character arc. On the surface, this change appears quite mundane, and significantly not at all an affirmation of Andre's belief in the supernatural. At the beginning of the film, he walks to the restaurant unconsciously, plagued by the myriad stresses of work. The film ends with Wally returning home in a taxi without anxiety. Ultimately, the conclusion of Wally's character arc manifests as a remembering of his own history.
I treated myself to a taxi. I rode home through the city streets. There wasn't a street, there wasn't a building that wasn't connected to some memory in my mind. There, I was buying a suit with my father. There, I was having an ice cream soda after school.
This lesson is arguably the central theoretical pivot of historical materialism. To become conscious, to live life ethically, is to become conscious of one's historical conditioning. It's also what makes My Dinner with Andre a neglected masterpiece.